Mother Knows Death, starring Nicole and Jemmy and Maria QK.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Mother Knows Death. We are joined by a very special guest for today's news episode. We have reporter and host of PopCrimeTV, Lauren Conlin. Welcome, Lauren.
Thank you so much for having me. This is such an honor.
Thanks for coming. We thought it would be so cool to have you because we're friends with you and we're usually like texting back and forth with you about these stories. And we're like, wait a second, everybody might want to hear us talk about it. So we also had that incredibly juicy dinner last month, I guess.
It was so fun. It was so fun. And yes, we do go back and forth. And I wanted to ask you, Nicole, I mean, we'll get there, but the bodies and the JetBlue wheel well, I was like, how is this possible? How is this possible? And you're right. People do probably want to hear about that.
Yeah, exactly. So let's start talking about, all right, so we didn't cover a whole lot of true crime this week when we came back from vacation, but obviously the biggest thing that happened was there was a terrorist attack. So let's start with that story maybe. Yeah, so hours after ringing in the new year, a ton of people were still partying on Bourbon Street in New Orleans, and then suddenly this pickup truck came barreling down the street. He hit a bunch of people, and then after that, he gets out of the car and starts shooting as police are responding to the scene.
Yes.
Yeah, that was terrible. We were away on our trip. You guys were away too, right, Lauren?
We were away. I was in Florida, right? And yeah, it was heartbreaking to wake up to news like that. And I think that it's very scary when you just see a couple headlines and you don't know what's going on. And to be honest, guys, the FBI still doesn't know what's going on. I mean, this guy, we think, his name is Shamsud Din Jabbar. I believe he was radicalized for a number of reasons. I mean, everything right now is pointing to that because he was a U.S. citizen. He was born and raised here. A year before he carried out this New Year's Day attack, he was in Egypt. He spent a few months in Egypt. And, Egypt is known for having a subsidiary of ISIS. And we know now that he was flying an ISIS flag on the truck. And yeah, I mean, it's scary. This ISIS subsidiary, it was founded, I believe, in 2014, and they took responsibility for a bunch of different kidnappings and a bunch of different attacks. And it's called ISIS Sinai. I don't know if you've heard of this, it was actually, I stand corrected, it was formed in 2011, and it's linked to Al Qaeda. And yeah, I mean, he also had a lot of different stuff going on in his life. He was married multiple times, I believe, 2 or 3 times. And his latest divorce, he was going through that. He owed a lot of money. He wasn't able to see his children. So I think at this point, for me to speculate that he was radicalized, I think that's valid for where we are right now with the investigation.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you can't ignore that the ISIS flag was in the truck as well. And then we have to talk about the meta glasses too, and him going to the scene of the crime in October, riding around on a bicycle with these glasses, which kind of make him really easily blend in, and scoping out where he's going to plan this attack.
Yeah, that just proves that it was premeditated to me. This was going to happen, whether or not anybody suspected this guy to do anything. This was in his head. And it's heartbreaking.
Why do you think the FBI at first was saying that it wasn't a terrorist attack? Because there were photos circulating online very early on of FBI agents taking photos of this flag that was in the back of his truck.
I think they say that to downplay things at first and to possibly just mitigate the circumstances so people don't go crazy. I mean, who knows? I think they're also thinking of people that might want to just go crazy on Muslims in general to retaliate. There's a number of reasons, but it bothered me a little bit after the fact that they kept saying it wasn't a terror attack over and over and over days later, after we kind of found out a little bit more about this guy's history, because I'm just like, you don't know that yet, especially that the fact that we found out that he did visit Egypt and he was flying this flag. I mean, it's like, you got to stop saying that because you don't know.
I think back in the day, they used to be able to do that where there was only news on the TV and you just listened to what you heard and that's all you knew. But they need to come up with a different way of approaching this because of social media, because we're all on X and just like looking at all of these pictures and stuff. And this is how you lose trust in the government, because you're trying to tell us not to believe what we see with our own eyes. You know what I mean?
Yes, I agree. And they also said something like, we believe that he did not work with anyone else. He worked alone. I guess I have issue with this, for them to go out and say a statement like that so quickly after the incident. I don't think that's right either, because it could take months, it could take a year for them to actually figure out if he worked alone or not. He knew there were no barricades there. And that was a huge point of contention with the Louisiana State Police and the city of New Orleans in general, because there should be barriers there. And barricades. And somebody, I don't know if it was him, but somebody had to inform him or alert him that they weren't there and it's wide open for him. But again, I just think it's irresponsible to come out and say things like that. He did not, work with anyone else. He worked alone. I don't think that it's confirmed at this point.
Dude, my husband he is a firefighter, but he went to school for emergency management. That was what his bachelor's or his master's degree was for. And I remember years ago, we were on the boardwalk just walking with all these people. And he's just like, this is what he learned in school. So he's just looking around all the time. And he's like, this is such a soft target. Someone could drive right up this ramp and just mow down all these people. And I didn't think of it as a regular mom walking on the boardwalk with my kids. But now you're walking around, and I just was in Las Vegas the other day. We're walking on that Fremont Street, like the original part of Vegas. And they had those big barricades up that no one could drive through because people are walking on that street all the time. And you think like, okay, if this was just there, this wouldn't have happened. You know what I mean?
Law enforcement.
Sucks.
Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, and now that the Super Bowl is happening in New Orleans next month, they're saying they're amping security, but why weren't we amping it in this party town on the biggest partying day of the year?
That is the question. Why not on New Year's Eve? And just to go back to the driving, I've spoken to law enforcement and just people that served on the anti-terrorism task force, and they said that is one of their biggest fears is vehicles, because they can't be stopped, right? They cannot be traced as a terror attack either. And I know that we're probably going to get into the Las Vegas attack as well, but it is really interesting that both of these guys use the Turo app. From what I've learned about the Turo app, it is a little bit more flexible, a little bit more loosey-goosey than, let's say, renting a car from Alamo or Enterprise and things of that nature, because Turo, you're actually renting it from another car owner. So it is a little bit different. Again, I don't necessarily believe in coincidences, but, and I don't know if I'm jumping the gun too far here, but I just want to point out Matthew Livelsberger, who was responsible for the Cybertruck explosion, and Shamsu Jabbar, they both served at Fort Bragg, and they both served in Afghanistan, and they both used the Turo app, and they carried out these crimes on New Year's Day. Again, it could be nothing, but I do think it's worth looking into.
How is it nothing?
I feel it's so hard to ignore the coincidences in this case with, the Cybertruck explosion at the Trump Hotel being only hours after the New Orleans attack. And same exact thing like you're saying. They've both rented the cars through essentially the same apps. They both were serving in the military. They did say at some point they were at the same base camp, but they can't prove that their times overlapped right now. So I think it'll be interesting to see if there were connections.
Right. And it also could be, it could be a little bit less conspiratorial than we're thinking.
Yeah.
I thought the other day, I do believe it. And, we've got Luigi Mangione, right, who shot the CEO. In his writings, he said something like, well, I was possibly going to use a bomb, I'm paraphrasing, but that would kill too many innocent people. Then we have Livelsberger. And so, by the way, to me, that indicates that Luigi Mangione is of sound mind, Then you have Livelsberger, who appears to not be of sound mind, because not only did he use explosives, but he also died by suicide. That would indicate you're not of sound mind. And then you've got Shamsu Jabbar, which to me, I believe he's radicalized. And I think there could be a component of traumatic brain injury there with Jabbar, as well as Livelsberger, because they served in the Army. And we know that vets don't get treated very well. That's my opinion in the United States. They don't get the help they need. It's also looked down upon if they reach out to somebody and say, I need help, my head is not right, especially if they're still serving. So I think it's really interesting here to possibly dive into some of these head injuries that these guys could possibly have.
Oh, definitely.
There was this other guy that carried out a mass shooting a couple years back that had a history of traumatic brain injury and being in the service as well. Do you remember that, like up in Maine I don't know if it was Maine or up north.
Yeah.
It was north of us, right? Remember that?
That
he went in the bowling alley and all that stuff?
Yeah.
There's so many of them you can't even keep on top of it. One thing I wanted to bring up was the meta glasses. Like, I'm not 100% familiar with what's the point of those for positive? Because obviously it's
I'm kind of with you. To me, it's like body cam. It's like body cam footage. I mean, that's really all it is to me, because I had a friend that had them and I'm kind of like, why are these so cool? It's just kind of like you're recording in 4D, I guess, everything that's around you. But I don't even think he was recording half the time that he was wearing these glasses. It was only 1 or 2 instances.
What I don't understand. Like, I just don't understand why a person needs that. Like,
I've
what's
read that
the
they're
good of
heavily
that technology
used in construction? Like, a lot of construction workers or architects will wear them as they're trying to landscape projects and everything. But beyond
they sell
that,
them at the mall. I just saw them at LensCrafters at the mall.
No, that's it.
I'm just trying to see, like, they keep creating this Facebook Live, this, that, and the other, and you think, like, really, what is the point? They don't ever sit there and say, what are the bad things that people are going to do with this technology that we're making? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Well, this brings up a good point about this. In the Vegas situation, he used ChatGPT to help him strategically plan this attack. And, you know, the owners of ChatGPT are trying to say basically that their system is trained to flag these and not encourage it or anything, but it was just using information already available on the internet. So what kind of defense is that?
That's a horrible defense. And I mean, just going back to Livelsberger, I don't know if you guys saw, but there's this podcaster, Sean Ryan.
Yeah.
And so did you see all of that where he had, he had someone on his show who got emails from Livelsberger and they were describing him saying something about drones and just, again, conspiratorial things. I believe that some of these emails have been verified, but I mean, they were getting a lot of heat saying that they weren't real. And I'm just like, what do they have why would they lie about this stuff? It's not, you know what I mean? They're not gaining anything from it. I guess he gets enough clicks and views that I don't think he necessarily would need this.
Yeah, and he just blew up. Like, why would he sabotage he had a good standing prior to this. And no, I think the FBI has confirmed that these are real emails from that guy.
Yes. I mean, so again, I don't know if all of that, there was a bunch of them, and I don't know if I mean, you could be right. I should have checked this morning, but I guess he again, like Mangione, kind of spells it out for us and says, this is not a terror attack. He just needed to cleanse himself from the deaths of his brothers and from all the people that he killed while he was serving. And it's heartbreaking, to be honest with you. And what's even more bizarre, and it just tells me, again, I'm not a doctor, but he was going through it and he did have some kind of brain injury as he's texting his ex-girlfriend, like, everything is fine, right? But his wife had kicked him out, apparently. He's going through, all of these issues. And everything's fine when he's texting her. It's bizarre and sad.
Well, they can tell if he had traumatic encephalopathy from having previous injuries, because what happens is if you have a brain injury, one of them is probably okay, but then it's something about having multiple brain injuries, and then you start just having almost signs of dementia. This was first noticed in boxers, actually, from getting punched in the head all of the time. And they can't really diagnose it until autopsy because they have to look at the brain under the microscope. And obviously, you can't really do without huge chunks of your brain while you're still alive. Now, the problem in his case is going to be that he was burned so bad in this particular suicide, but there might still be viable brain tissue left because you think that he was burned beyond recognition, and so that makes you think that, you know, he might have been skeletonized or something like that, but that's just not the case. Even if you want to cremate somebody, it doesn't completely make their body just ashes. You know what I mean? You have to cook somebody, use the word cook, for a very long time at a high temperature so 1600 to 1800 degrees Fahrenheit for 90 minutes to cremate a person, right? So this particular fire was at a high, it was a high temperature, but he was only in that for a short period of time. So not to be gross, but think about sticking a piece of steak in the oven, even if it's at 900 or 1000 degrees, you stick it in for a minute, it's not going to cook it all the way through, right? It's just going to be crispy on the outside kind of and raw on the inside. And that's what happens in some of these fire deaths. So that's how they were able to determine that he shot himself before the fire, because they could tell that he was hemorrhaging before the fire rather than getting shot after he was already burned. So he does have some soft tissue left. So I'm not sure if they'll have enough to be able to look at it.
Do you want to talk about, too, how they identified his body?
I was going to ask you about this, about the tattoo. How are they able, if he's charred to a crisp, how are they able to sort of still see a tattoo?
So a tattoo is actually on, you're looking at it, your skin is the epidermis, but it goes deep into the dermis of the skin and the bottom layers of the skin. So if he had any skin left, they would still be able to see it. And we have a friend, her name is Michelle Miranda, Dr. Michelle Miranda, but she does forensic tattoo. I don't know if you've ever seen her on Instagram, but she just focuses and just does research in forensic tattoos. It's really cool. And
wow.
So she would be, I mean, you could talk to her about this for hours, how they identify people and stuff, but yeah, I don't think that his whole entire body was so charred that there was no way to see. It's just maybe, especially he shot himself in the head, and then the explosion occurred because of those gases near his head. So his teeth were missing, his facial features weren't recognizable anymore, but his arm or wherever he had the tattoo, that piece of skin could have still been present. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I was just confused about that because there was all these reports that he was charred to a crisp, and then it's like, oh, we were able to identify him with a tattoo. And I'm like, oh no, I don't get it, but also ew, you know?
And that's what starts all the speculation starts online, because there's all of these pictures online of his ID was like barely charred, right? So people, and the gun was bare. So they're like, how come the fire was so bad that you can't even recognize him? But like I said, he even looked this up. He was looking up how to carry this out, and he looked up how, if he shot himself, how that fire coming out of the gun would cause the explosion. So that all happened near his head. So I would say that that's where the majority of the damage and the fire were, from the initial explosion. But your body's also made with fat that's fuel. You know what I mean? That fuels the fire. Whereas if those things were at the bottom of his feet, it is possible, because there were witnesses. They got him out really fast. You know what I mean? He wasn't in there too long. So that's what I think happened with that.
Right.
Well, were you also freaking out? Because I read he was originally planning to take this out at the Grand Canyon, and you were there right around that time. Yeah,
I didn't hear that.
That was the original plan, and I guess right now they're trying to figure out why he made the last minute change.
Wait, seriously?
Yeah, I'm not joking.
I'm really happy, because I'm like, I freak out about this shit. I would have been like, we're not going there. You know what I mean? Like,
well, it would have been around what day were you there? On that day or the day after?
I was there. No, I was there the day. I was there on January 2nd, probably.
Yeah, so
right?
what happened the day before?
Oh, well, yeah. I was there January 2nd. in theory.
So scary. Oh my gosh. That's so scary.
But the whole time I went to a lot of these different places with the national parks, like the Grand Canyon. We waited in line for over an hour in our car just to get in. There's so many people there. And of course now my husband's got me thinking the same exact way of just like, this could totally happen. Like, why wouldn't they just come here? There's all these people. It's freaking scary, man.
People are scary now.
Yeah, it's really terrifying. And, to think this attack could have been so much worse, but they were saying the Cybertruck was actually one of the poorest choices of cars to do this because it contained most of the explosion. So if it was any other car, it could have been way worse and injured a bunch of people. But at least, only a couple people.
Maybe he intentionally did that so other people wouldn't get hurt. I mean,
I feel like that would make him too sound of mine. I don't know. You know what I mean? I feel like listen, you're right, because I did see that if he had a different type of car, it wouldn't necessarily go upward. Like you had said, it kind of got his head and it went upward, the explosion and the fire. But just going back to some of the conspiracies, Elon Musk, he shot down a couple conspiracies of people who said, well, maybe somebody shot him or forced him to shoot himself, and then the car drove itself to the location. But Elon Musk said, no, you have to be an active presence in the driver's seat in order for it to do that. But I do think it cannot be lost, the symbolism here, right? Of an Elon Musk car in front of a Trump hotel. It's beyond me. And this guy was supposedly a Trump supporter. So that right there, I'm like, well, I've already said I don't necessarily believe in coincidences, but what does that mean? What does that mean to everybody?
It is. It's so weird. I agree with you.
You can't ignore that at all.
Right. So, but we just don't have answers. That's my thing. Yeah, there's no answers.
But will they? In both cases, with both terrorist attacks, their loved ones were saying they seemed totally normal and didn't, especially with the first guy in New Orleans, they didn't seem there was any signs of him being radicalized until he started posting all those videos on Facebook hours before the attack.
Exactly.
Which is a whole other thing because, I'm censored on Instagram so bad.
Oh, wow.
I mean, for years. And I'm just like, if they could figure out that I'm posting a video of someone getting open heart surgery or something, and they could take it down within a minute, I just don't understand how they can't find this stuff and have keywords or something that triggers the system that gets it off right away. I know they have it. Mm-hmm. I just know it,
Well, now I think things are going to be a little bit more loosey-goosey, if you will, because he's making changes, Mark Zuckerberg, to Facebook, saying they're not going to start putting those misinformation disclaimers and whatnot. And I mean, yeah, I get it, because whatever you were doing wasn't really working for everybody. And and you're right, it wasn't exactly quote unquote fair, I guess. It wasn't, there was no balance, if you will, because why would you get censored but this guy wouldn't?
Yeah, exactly. We could talk a whole episode about that,
about everything. All right, should we shift gears to Bryan Kohberger?
Yes.
Ooh, yes.
All right, so if anybody has ever listened to this show before, we have talked at length about Bryan Kohberger. So for those of you who don't know, which has to be less than 1% of our listeners, he was the man.
No, listen, I'm serious. Sometimes I'll be at a party or something and they'll say like, what case is the biggest case that you're interested in this year? And I always say, oh, the Bryan Kohberger and stuff. And they're like, oh, I haven't heard of that. And I'm like, what the fuck?
Wait, you sound like me. My husband told this is so weird. And I'm sorry to interrupt you, but the exact same thing happened to me. I brought it up at a party, because I'm like, well, if anybody knows any crime stories, it has to be Idaho. It has to be Kohberger. And I was shocked, just like you. I was like, you don't know that? And my husband's like, not everybody is as crazy as you, or as you know,
that's
as into, yeah. I'm like, what do you mean? This is on mainstream news. It's not like it's just me talking about it. Jeez.
Exactly. It's absolutely crazy. My husband's one of those people, though, that just will have absolutely no idea what's like major breaking news. Last night I said, did you see all these? Or I said, text your cousin who lives in LA and make sure he's okay. And he's like, about what?
Oh my God.
Like, I don't know, the entire city's burning down.
Sorry, it's not funny.
I kind of get jealous of people that could live in that world, really, because it must be, ignorance is bliss. Like, it just must be so nice to just not be worried at all times. Like, every day you wake up and I'm thinking, like, yesterday, okay, we're going to talk about this terrorist attack that was horrible. And then you're like, wait a second, LA is burning down right now and all this has happened. It's just like all the time it's turned on,
Mm-hmm. Nicole, I'm with you. I say that all the time. I kind of wish I used to be very ignorant, and I kind of wish I was back in that place. But I do when I don't. But it's weird because you go to bed at night and your brain just starts spinning, for me anyway. And I'm always just thinking, I always just make sure to pray and to be. I tell my kids never take an ordinary day for granted, because ordinary days are the best days. You go about your routine, nothing's wrong. And I think that's just important to remember all the time, especially with the climate that we live in right now.
Oh, definitely. So for those of you who don't know about this case, which I could confidently say the three of us are slightly judging you for, Bryan Kohberger is the man charged with killing 4 students in Moscow, Idaho, and he was apparently investigated in another home invasion a year before that.
Yes. Well, they didn't investigate him until he was the suspect for the 4 murders in Idaho, or the 4 co-eds. So yeah, I mean, at first that was a little bit unclear to me. They looked at him.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And I mean, guys, I have to say, I think that this is going to help him in his trial, and I do. I think this is going to help him because, even though they said he's got these bushy eyebrows, and that was, a huge descriptive element that the one surviving roommate had described, he had these bushy eyebrows. So did the person whose house he broke into, or the whatever perp this is, whoever this guy is. He broke into this house, and they described this perp as having bushy eyebrows as well. However, there is a big difference in their heights.
Yeah.
Right. So this Bryan Kohberger is around 6 feet. Is that right?
Yeah, so he's about 6 feet.
Is it possible that this other person has the height off? Because what grown adult male is 5'3"? There's not many of them. I mean, think about it.
Yeah,
that's true. I know that you've seen guys that are that small, but not really ever. It's very rare to see a dude that's 5'3".
You're right. You're right.
I mean, that's how. I don't know how tall you are. I'm 5 foot. I'm almost 5'9", right?
Okay.
For guys to be shorter than me already is rare, and that short is Ray. You're like 5.
I'm 5'4", which they said the suspect was between 5'3" and 5'5". So around my height.
That's just
short.
It's. I mean, not to say that that's not possible, obviously, but it's just like, keep that in mind, that's not that common.
Well, the other thing going against him was he wasn't yet enrolled in the university, so it's not like the height was the only difference. I think there are, weird similarities in the sense of broke in the middle of the night, was silent through the entire exchange, holding a knife, ski mask.
You're right that this is going to hurt him, because if it's definitely not him, then who's that person that never got caught?
That's what I think it's going to help him. I think that they're going to say, well, what about this guy who has the same type of MO? However, this guy is much shorter. Why are you not looking into this guy? Why are you only hyper-focused on my client? I feel like that's what his team is going to say. If they're good defense attorneys or public defenders, whatever he's using, I believe a public defender, and she is good. That's the thing. She is good. And thus far, personally, you guys, I think he's guilty. He is the guy.
We're on board.
Okay, there's no doubt in my mind he is the guy. However,
why? Just because his mugshot is the scariest freaking thing ever? I'm sorry, when that came out and they were like, because we were on, wasn't it last year or 2 years ago around this time?
2022 was the murder.
Yeah, because we usually go away that time. And we're in the car, and I hear that they have a suspect. And when that picture came across, it scared me when I looked at his eyes.
I know. He's scary. He is blank behind the eyes. He is blank. And that's it for me. I mean, also, I do think they have a lot of evidence against him, or that they can use against him. Just because they don't have the murder weapon, I don't think that's going to be an issue. I really don't. I don't think we've seen all of the DNA testing yet. I mean, we haven't. That's factual. So I believe that he is the guy, but I think this is going to be big, or a big part of his defense. Like, why didn't you look at this guy, this shorter guy who seemed to have the same features, supposedly, as my client here? I mean, you guys had your mind made up already. You didn't do any other investigating. And that's kind of what Scott Peterson said, right? There was a burglary. Why didn't you look into this burglary? You had your mind, made up about me. And I don't think it's necessarily going to matter in the end, but it's something, right?
Think about the woman that was in the first burglary in 2021 also. So, this happens in 2021 in October, and then they can't catch anybody who's done it. And then all of a sudden, the beginning of 2023, so they were saying 13 days after Kohberger was arrested, that's when they started looking into him for this other case potentially. So now you're thinking, not only did somebody break in my house, but it was potentially this horrific murderer. And thank God I escaped that. And then all of a sudden, now they don't think he did it, and now your case is still unsolved.
Yeah.
It's very scary to think about. We had a similar thing happen in our family. When I was 13, somebody broke in our house when I was home alone with my younger cousin. And I've been able to be at peace with that because they caught the person very quickly, and luckily nothing happened to us. So I'm thinking about how horrific this entire situation must have been.
I'm shook. That is so traumatizing for you.
It was.
Crap.
It was horrible. Because I was a single mom and I was at work, and it was during the summer and she was home. I was working in the pathology lab, like normal day, and I get a call that Maria calls me and she's like, someone's in the house. And I was like, well, didn't we just move in? And we
just moved in that house, I think 3 months before that.
So she said, I said, what do you mean? And she's like, there's a guy in the living room. And then I didn't think anything of it because I thought my sister was still home and it was like the cable person or whatever, because we were living with my sister and my niece at the time. And I was like, oh, it's probably just the Comcast guy, like putting in the cable, right? And then I said, well, go upstairs and tell Annie. And then she told me that she wasn't home. And I was like, oh my God. And luckily the cops came and everything. And here it was just this guy that was like a drifter walking up the street, and he was high on drugs and he just wandered in the house. There was cash on the table. He didn't even touch it. Like it ended up working out so fine.
Wait, Maria, did he see you? Did he see you and your cousin?
So this is what happened. So we lived in this Victorian house, and I was sleeping in your bedroom, and my mom's bedroom at the time had one door that went into the living room and one door that went to the upstairs, because it was like a former like drawing room or whatever, the old setup. So I heard a bunch of noise. We had this was what, 2008. So we had like beads in the window, whatever the style was at the time. And I'm hearing these beads moving like crazy. And I'm like, what is that noise? So I open the door and I see this like huge man just standing in the dining room. And, I had been asleep, so I didn't know what was going on. Like you, I assumed maybe it was a cable person or something. We just moved in. And that's why I called you and then called Annie to see where you were. And then it was clear that the person wasn't supposed to be in there. So luckily I was able to back into the bedroom, close that door, go out the other door and go upstairs. And then we just threw a dresser in front of the door, waited for the cops to get there. But and I feel like I'm in a really lucky situation because nothing bad happened. I didn't really have an interaction per se. I just saw this man that was turned around. So
it could have been much worse. The cops came. She described him perfectly. They found him walking up the street. Then we had to go with the cops, and she had to identify the person
in a lineup, which was ridiculous.
It was outrageous.
But you were 13?
Yes,
13 years old.
And she described him 100%. The cops were just like, yo, your daughter is like on her shit.
Aww.
Like 100%. And then she pointed him out, and it just was like, it was so insane.
But my general point is like, I had a home invasion situation that went pretty good, all things considered. So I'm thinking about waking up 3:30 in the morning. There's a man in a ski mask holding a knife. I don't know if I'm about to get murdered, sexually assaulted, or what. And then they've never caught this person.
Yeah, exactly.
I would move far, far away. I'm serious. I would.
regardless if it was Kohberger or not, which at this point they're saying it wasn't, they still need to keep that investigation open and try to find that person.
Especially if he was that much smaller than Kohberger. But Nicole, you bring up a great point. It is, I don't know. I mean, I don't know the last time I have seen a man smaller than me. You're right. I don't go out that much anymore. But in life in general, I haven't seen like a dad at school that's that much smaller than me. So I guess that's what I'm thinking of. But no, that's a good point. I feel like I need this trial to happen. I would like to move on with my life. Some of these, you know what I mean? I mean, and also I do believe, the families are just clearly beside themselves. And I don't want to speak out of my ass because I don't know what it feels like, but I would think that they need him to be convicted in order to start healing and to move on with their life or this part of their life. And again, I don't know. I'm not going to pretend like I know, but for me, I think I would want that. And that would help me heal or start to heal, I should say. But I do think it's interesting, and you guys weigh in here, but the whole death penalty by firing squad, they're saying that is technically more humane than lethal injection. Nicole?
Yeah,
I mean,
it is.
It is.
It is for sure, yeah, because you'll get shot and you'll die right away. The lethal injection is really terrible, actually. All the autopsies that they do on those people have signs of pulmonary edema, which means like you essentially feel like you're drowning and you're alive for a while before death occurs. Which, listen, I don't have a problem if some of these people suffer, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you really want to get the job done and be the least pain as possible, then just shoot the person in the head right away and like end it for them, really.
Right.
Or the chest, I don't know where I think they aim for the heart, probably. I don't think that they would shoot someone in the head. I don't know. I really don't even know about it. I just know that I've always said that, like, if you're gonna, it's the same thing. Like, if you want to talk, I shouldn't even say this out loud, but suicide, like, you definitely do not want to OD on medication. You would want to just shoot yourself. Taking medication's the worst way to go. We had a girl one time that some woman tried to OD on Tylenol, very young girl, like 17 years old, tried to OD on Tylenol, and she lived. She had to get her liver taken out. It was terrible. I had another person that drank bleach before, and she ended up living, and they had to take out her esophagus because the bleach totally it corroded her esophagus. Just like things like that, and you're just like, shooting is just kind of like, it's done. But, you know what I mean?
Women don't
do that.
No, yeah. I studied this a little bit last year. I was researching for the Sandra Birchmore case. Do you know that case?
No.
She was pregnant, and it's a horrific case. I mean, she was groomed allegedly by these police officers, these Staunton police officers in Massachusetts, and one of them, who was married, got her pregnant. She died by suicide, but it was so bizarre because she died with she hung herself, but it wasn't really a hanging. She tied one part to the doorknob and then she opened it or something, or however that works. But it was just weird because women don't necessarily do that. They generally take pills. So that right there was like a huge red flag, I guess. And then later it was determined that it was a homicide and not a suicide. But that's what kind of caused me to look into females in general and the manner in which they try to die by suicide. So not to be super depressing, sorry. But yeah, it's rare for females to use guns.
Yeah, so I'm not sure what they're going to do with him, but I've always had this theory since this whole entire case started that there's just more to the case. And I don't know, because he's a criminal justice student in a PhD program, that maybe he was trying to carry out this murder so he could write a paper about it somehow, about the investigation and stuff. Like, there's some kind of spin to it. Yeah. I don't know. Like, I keep trying to think, is he an intelligent person, like a super, like Ted Kaczynski type of person? Or is he just, like, I don't believe that he would be so sloppy with leaving the knife sheath and the DNA. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like, you can't be that smart and in that program and know.
But can he be prepared for the adrenaline if this was really his first time?
I was just going to say that it was his first time, really. I believe, carrying out murders like this. And you could say the same thing for Luigi Mangione. I mean, he's an Ivy League grad. He most likely planned this for a very long period of time, but even he messed up. If you don't have the experience, I would think that your first time is not going to be perfect, especially if you're committing crimes of this stature. It's not like I mean, I don't want to minimize other crimes and other victims, I guess, or other survivors, but your first time, you want to just stab 4 people in a house full of multiple people. And I mean, he knew allegedly he was at the house many times before this happened. And Luigi Mangione, I feel like he was watching Brian Thompson before. That's how he knew the entrance he was going to come in. And he had planned this and you know, it was thought out. It's just like, you don't know until you're actually doing it, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's true. When you're taking someone's life, you don't know how you're going to react to that. It's not the same as killing someone on a video game, right? Like there's emotions associated with that.
Right.
And the way Bryan Kohberger did it was just so it's not like shot and the body fell down and you walk away. I mean, it was engaging and gruesome and very gruesome and not even expecting how, I mean, if you saw the blood dripping outside of the house. I mean, it was a scene. I can't even imagine. I can imagine. For first responders and for forensic investigators to have to walk into that, I just, I can't. Yeah.
And it's so personal. I mean, you're fighting as a victim. You're fighting and fighting and fighting. And at what point, you know, I've thought about this with other cases I've covered, but at what point does your body just stop fighting, right? At which point, because you hear about these victims and how many times they were stabbed and how badly it would hurt just for you to be stabbed once, you know, let alone 16 to 30 times. I mean, it's unspeakable. It's just something that I wish I could get out of my head. But again, going back to when I lay down at night and I try to go to sleep, these are the things that my messed up brain thinks about. So
yeah, and wait till the trial and you start hearing about the actual autopsy reports, and I don't know how much of that they're going to publicize, but it's going to be worse than we even could imagine, really.
Right.
Well, I feel like this is when we were watching the Jodi Arias trial, which I was way too young to be watching every single day. But I feel like every day as the more information came out, and like you're saying, the stabbing are so intimate and you have to keep doing it over and over. So her self-defense argument was like, okay, but how many times did she end up stabbing him? Like 30 times or something crazy?
Right.
So at what point is it like, all right, it's definitely not self-defense, because most people wouldn't just keep engaging like that?
Exactly. And I've been covering a case out of Kansas, or Oklahoma, I should say, but I recently returned from the pretrial hearing, and these 2 women, one of them was in a custody battle with basically her ex-mother-in-law. She was never married to her son, but the ex-mother-in-law allegedly got 4 other people to help plan her murder, and also her supervisor, who was kind of like an acquaintance of hers or a girlfriend of hers, who was a mother of 4 and a preacher's wife. And the mother of 4, she was stabbed 16 times, who she had nothing to do with anything, right? Nothing to do with anything. And then you have Veronica, who was in the middle of all this. She was stabbed over 30 times. And I think, Nicole, you would find Jillian, the supervisor, her autopsy really troubling, because and after hearing what I heard at the pretrial hearing, I believe she was paralyzed, and the defendant who saw her after she was stabbed, I believe 14 times, he noticed that she was blinking and not moving. And so he decided to stab her in the jugular. And I believe that is what killed her. But he thought to himself, well, we're going to bury these women. It's probably better if I stab her than have her wake up 15 feet underground in a chest freezer. And you're like, oh, wow, you're so kind. How nice of you. God. But it's the most disturbing and terrifying case I have come across in a very, very long time. Justice for these women cannot come soon enough.
There's definitely a difference between people who kill people like that versus just shooting someone. You know what I mean?
Right.
Oh, totally.
Sorry, I didn't mean to bring it down that much, but yeah, sorry. I'm like, oh.
No, you're good. I mean,
we're always on our
half
show.
The stories take us there.
That's the thing. It's like our show, and it's the same vibe as yours. Like we try to keep positive and upbeat and laughing about certain things, but we're also talking about the most terrible day in some people's lives. So
yes.
All right, let's talk about this NICU nurse. So in the last couple months at this Virginia hospital, a couple of newborns in the NICU were suffering what they are calling unexplainable fractures, which prompted this internal investigation. So is it common that babies get fractures, or in the NICU they would be more susceptible to getting fractures?
No, I mean, when the most common injury or fracture that would occur in a newborn like that is when they're being born. And they're getting either pulled out of a C-section, they're breech presentation, or they're stuck in the vaginal canal. Sometimes, like even one of my coworkers, his son's clavicle got broke when they were pulling when they're using forceps to pull a baby out that's stuck, right? And sometimes they have to do excessive force to get the kid out because they don't want, a broken clavicle isn't a dead baby, right?
Right.
So that's the most common cause of a fracture in a newborn like that. Is accidental, you would say. When you see fractures in children that are under 18 months old that don't walk yet, it's almost always child abuse.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I just want to know this woman. I was trying to search her on Facebook. What is your background? Like, what was her childhood like that she allegedly felt the need to do this? Could she not have children of her own? I always try to look into one's psyche. Again, not a doctor, don't have any type of degree there, but you got to wonder, she's not just doing this quote for fun, right? She's got to be telling herself something that makes her do this, that makes her think that this is the right thing to do. That's just something that it's so horrific and it's so disturbing. I'm just trying to make sense of it, I guess.
Yeah, and I saw photos of her from when she graduated from nursing school, and it's like it looks like she has a supportive family that was there. That I think the same thing. I'm like, what happened in this she's young, right? Like 20?
She's 26, and it seems like she's been a nurse for at least 5 years. And I guess what prompted this investigation in particular was 3 babies ended up getting fractures between November and December of last year. And then when they started investigating it, they realized they had 4 similar cases from the summer of 2023. So there are 7 potential victims that they know about.
Right.
So so one of the dads of the victims was interviewed and said that all 7 babies have the same thing in common, is that they're all male.
It's so gross. They're babies. Yeah, that's where I'm just like, no. And when you said something about people facing lethal injection, and some of these people possibly deserve to suffer. People that harm children and babies, yeah, they deserve to suffer. I said it. I say don't care. Yeah, too. I'm like, I don't care. They deserve it. It's inhumane. A child, a baby, an infant, they can't defend themselves. My gosh.
No, we always are bringing up the argument, why are you going through all of the schooling and everything to end up doing these egregious crimes? And she's only 26 years old. She's facing now up to potentially 30 years in prison between the multiple charges she has. So you've completely ruined your life, and you've barely just started your adult life. What are you thinking doing this?
But you
and
won't
was that
get
her goal?
There's just more to it, because if you're a nurse and you have any education, like, that you're going to get in trouble doing this. It's not something you could just get away with. You can't just say any of your patients has a weird thing. You can't just be like, oh, I don't know how that happened, and there not be an investigation. And there's specifically like orthopedic doctors that specialize in this. They could tell fractures that happen if they're typical with abuse or whatever. Like they have certain looks to them, these cases. Certain areas of the bone, if they're broken, they're almost always associated with abuse cases because they just don't naturally break like that, So when she did that, she had to know that they were going to do imaging and they were an investigation. So it's not like, remember like Charles Conlin, the one that was associated?
Yeah, I was just going to bring that up.
Okay, so do you know about that case? My friend Amy, she was in this,
It's the movie The Good Nurse, on Netflix.
Oh,
but it's based
okay.
off of the nurse serial killer who killed, they think, up to 400 victims. But basically the hospitals knew he was a problem and knew he was probably killing these patients, but didn't want the PR crisis. So they just kept moving him around.
Oh, I do remember this. Oh my gosh.
But he was like slipping things into the IV. It was like a little less obvious that he was doing it.
Mhm.
And then they would say, okay, this person just went into a diabetic coma. And then they thought, okay, that's weird. But it started like not adding up. But it was a little bit more discreet than just blatantly breaking a neonate's leg, you know? Like it's just so weird.
Yeah. Do you guys watch Dexter Original Sin?
Yeah, I did. I didn't start the new one yet, though.
Oh, that's what I mean. So
no.
The new one's called Original Sin, and this is not giving anything away. It's actually so good, by the way. I didn't think I would like it because I love the original characters, but I love this. But there is the cliche nurse that, you know, harms people. And again, this doesn't really give anything away, but it's what you said. It's subtle. It's not breaking limbs. And you'd think that if you're going to do that, you would do it in a subtle manner if you don't want to get caught. But I think that, and again, without knowing everything, there's a difference, right? You are mentally ill and you're inherently evil. Could you be both? Probably. Is this woman one over the other? I'm thinking maybe she's more mentally ill because, like you said, it seems very obvious at this point that you're going to get caught if you're doing it in this manner.
Yeah, and it's the same thing as like, I don't know, like maybe teachers that end up that harm children, or priests that harm children and stuff. It's like people go into these fields so they have access to what they're trying to do. So it could and nurses and doctors are people just the same as everyone else, right? So it's like you're just going to get a bad one once in a while, right?
I don't know. It's just so disturbing to think about because, you know, your average baby isn't in the NICU, right? So these are children that are specially put in there.
Yeah, they're premature babies that have to be in there because they need assistance to go out into the real world, whatever that particular thing is. But they are definitely more fragile, but the bones, you know, when a fetus is born, the bones some of them are softer, especially the skull, because it needs to increase in size as the child grows into an adult. But the bones themselves are still very strong, and they don't just easily fracture. I think one of the excuses they gave to one of the parents was they thought that the baby's leg broke when the baby was getting an injection. And I'm like, no. Like no matter, unless there was excessive force, you know what I mean? Like something wasn't right about that. So they wouldn't just break easily like that.
Also, she didn't look overly arrogant either, because sometimes these alleged killers are just arrogant and they think, oh, we'll never get caught. We can do whatever we want. Judging from her mugshots, she looks a little bit timid. She doesn't seem like somebody who would be, you know, overly confident, I guess.
Yeah, she just looks very unassuming, right?
Yes, totally.
Yeah.
Let's wrap up, though, with talking about the wheel well drama. So we had closed Tuesday's show discussing this United flight that landed in Maui, and they discovered a dead body in the wheel well. And now it has happened again, this time in Florida, with 2 dead bodies.
So the one in Maui was on Christmas Day, right? Or Christmas Eve or Christmas Day. So that was only a couple weeks ago, and now this one just happened.
I don't understand. I was just on a JetBlue flight to Fort Lauderdale and from Fort Lauderdale, and that's what I immediately thought of literally a week ago. But they believe these bodies were in there for 2 weeks.
I was going to say these bodies were definitely on your plane. They were there for a long time.
I mean, so okay, they described that they were doing a routine check. Cool. Where was this routine check before? Before 2 weeks, 3 weeks? Why are we just discovering that there are decomposed bodies? I mean, I don't understand this at all. How do you get up there, Nicole? What would happen to your body when you were going, you know, across the country on multiple flights here? My mind is just going crazy.
So we just talked about this yesterday. The main cause of death with stowaways is, number one, it's cold, so you could get hypothermia. I mean, most of these people die anyway. The stowaways, most of them. There's a few documented cases of survivors, but Humans can't
Wow.
survive in that really cold temperature, like negative degrees, sometimes negative 50 degrees, right? They could literally freeze to death.
In the air, right?
Yes, in the
okay,
air,
okay.
high altitude. So you can't live in a high altitude either if you're a human. Lack of oxygen, you could just pass out right away. And that's what usually happens is they go up, the altitude's too high, and they pass out because of the lack of oxygen, and they're up in the wheel well. And when the wheels come down to land the plane, they fall out onto the ground and like splat on someone's driveway.
I can't.
I have a case of it in the gross room of a person that just fell on a suburban neighborhood, like splat on someone's driveway in front of their minivan.
I mean,
that
just
fell from an airplane.
I mean, I know it's more nuanced than this, but I'm just being silly, but just to not pay for your flight and to not be, I mean, it just doesn't seem worth it. And I know, again, I know that it's more than that. There's different circumstances, but like that, it does seem like a death sentence to anybody whose brain thinks rationally.
Yeah.
How are they accessing the wheel wells?
That's the scariest part of it. Because if they could get in the wheel well, then they can they're hiding in the bottom of a plane. Like if they have bombs strapped to them, that's a problem.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Did you see that really dumb movie on Netflix with Taron Egerton? It was
I just watched it.
Yeah, I mean, and it's that too. You're like, okay, you're making this seem really easy, and that it's so simple to just dismantle a bomb on a plane and jump in there. And I'm thinking of this right now as we discuss this.
No, that's exactly what I was thinking about too, because I just watched that, I think, on Sunday night or something. So, Mom, for this movie on Netflix is basically like this terrorist group puts this like earpiece in a TSA agent's ear, and they're like, you're gonna let this bag go through with a bomb, or we're gonna kill your pregnant girlfriend, and whatever. It's this whole drama. But then they show the guy like spoiler alert for anybody that wants to watch it. At the end of the movie, that they show this man just like so easily disabling this bomb midair, right?
Yep. It's like Jason Bateman too is the bad guy, and I actually love Jason Bateman. But he's doing the same sarcastic voice that he always uses, but he's this big. It's such a waste of 2 hours. I wouldn't recommend it.
It was hard to believe.
Yes. Totally.
But this is my point too. With the conditions being so cold, it's essentially like you're putting these I mean, they probably died the first time they went up in the air, right? Just because of the altitude. Especially this plane went to frickin' Salt Lake City, high altitude and freezing, right? But the bodies were essentially refrigerated / frozen up there. So for them to be decomposed, it had to just be a really long time. Like they can't decompose in those conditions. You know what I mean?
So how long would you think?
I would say, I mean, you're saying 2 weeks. It could be even longer than that. Like just if the plane's landed in Florida and it's there for a couple days, then okay, that could definitely cause advanced decomposition for sure. But if you're saying, like they were saying, it originated in Jamaica. They did say they thought that they were from Jamaica, but I'm like, no, because that was only a day ago. There's no way. It went from Jamaica to JFK to Salt Lake City to JFK to Fort Lauderdale in one 24-hour day. I don't know. Or over the course of 2 days, whatever it was. Because
I think I just read on, it was CNN or something, that local law enforcement had speculated that they were there for 2 weeks, but I don't know. I'm thinking to myself, like this, it's scary. Like you said, how do they get up there and how are they not discovered? If it's a routine check, why are you not doing more routine checks? But I'm not going to pretend like I know the inner workings of, how airports and planes operate, because I really don't. But does that affect the way a plane flies too? I mean, I just don't understand, and I'm very alarmed.
And I don't know how if the bodies are dead up there, unless there's a pocket that they can go in where they wouldn't fall out because they can't hold on to anything, obviously, unless they were jammed somewhere. Because that's another thing. When the landing gear goes up and down, it crushes people to death too. Because there's like all different sorts of causes of death. But when they say a body's badly decomposed, I don't know what that means, because really, if a person's decomposed in Philadelphia for 1 day in the summer, it looks pretty nasty. You can get green and bloated and smelly. But then completely decomposed or severely decomposed to me is like skeletonized remains. So there's such a variety. I mean, it could be months that a person was up there. I just don't really know.
But was it
what they're describing?
Was it a routine inspection, or did they start smelling something when they were working on a different part of the plane, and that's what prompted the inspection?
They are not telling us that. If that is the truth, I would be real. I mean, look, as somebody else commented on X, they're like, what if there's a serial killer that works at the airport and they stash the bodies in a wheel well? I was like, ooh, that's actually interesting, but I don't think so. But yeah, but I love the imagination there. Look, I think I would like to know more as to how this happened. And I would like to see some JetBlue sales right now, bookings. Have their bookings dropped? Seriously, I want to know. Are more people going to Delta, to American? I'm curious.
Is there a way you could check to see if it was the same plane you were on as well? Is what I want to know.
Because you said JFK, I flew out of LaGuardia, so I don't think. I felt very relieved hearing you say that just now, because I don't think I read the JFK part. So thank goodness. I think we're good.
Well, Lauren, thank you so much for coming on our show. Do you want to tell everyone where they could find you?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. This was so fun. You can find me on YouTube at PopCrimeTV, or my website, which is PopCrime.tv. And you can find me on social media at Lauren Emily Conlin on Instagram, and Conlin_Lauren on Twitter, and Lauren Conlin 4 on TikTok.
Amazing.
Wait, what about this? I want to hear about this Fox Nation show that you did too. Because I think our listeners will really want to watch that too.
Thank you so much for bringing that up. So right now, streaming on Fox Nation, I'm part of a special that it's about 33 minutes. It's about the capture of Luigi Mangione, and it's about Bryan Thompson, the United Healthcare CEO. A lot of what's in that special is based on my reporting, because the minute I found out that he was killed, I raced down to the Hilton. I wanted to just retrace all of his steps, because I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe a crime like this was caught on camera, and that we didn't know more, and that we weren't able to catch him right away. And just knowing that you can't go anywhere in Manhattan, you can't go to a coffee shop, you can't go anywhere without being caught on film, I was just fascinated, and I wanted to know more. So yeah, watch the special. I would really love that. And it's really interesting. It's really well done. You do need a subscription to Fox Nation. So I think it's like $7 a month. You can always do a trial and cancel if anything. But yeah.
Sometimes you can log, like, when I go to my Comcast, or I don't know what it's, Xfinity or whatever, sometimes you could log in through your provider and have access to stuff for like a session or something for free.
Yes, they actually said that. Use your, when somebody was logging in, use your Comcast or Xfinity. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, so it's awesome. I'm excited for you that you got to do that, and it is such an interesting case. So I can't wait for the trial of that either.
Same here, and I think it was just important to show that Bryan Thompson was a human being with children. And, we shouldn't take the law into our own hands. It's not right. We'll live in a lawless country if we all start to do that.
Yeah, really. You're right.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. I'll talk to you guys soon. Let's go out soon.
Yes, for sure. Thank you for listening to Mother Knows Death. As a reminder, my training is as a pathologist assistant. I have a master's level education and specialize in anatomy and pathology education. I am not a doctor, and I have not diagnosed or treated anyone, dead or alive, without the assistance of a licensed medical doctor. This show, my website, and social media accounts are designed to educate and inform people based on my experience working in pathology, so they can make healthier decisions regarding their life and well-being. Always remember that science is changing every day, and the opinions expressed in this episode are based on my knowledge of those subjects at the time of publication. If you are having a medical problem, have a medical question, or are having a medical emergency, please contact your physician or visit an urgent care center, emergency room, or hospital. Please rate, review, and subscribe to Mother Knows Death on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or anywhere you get podcasts. Thanks.